ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for your service over the last 3 weeks. We know what an imposition this has been for you. It's been incredibly hard in your personal lives, I'm sure, and we appreciate your time and attention for taking such good notes. Bo Dukes should be sitting in that chair, not Ryan. Bo Dukes should be on trial for the murder of Tara Grinstead, not Ryan. Where was Bo Dukes in this trial? Why did the state not bring him? Why did we have to call Bo Dukes? Why did Bo Dukes not answer our questions? Be thinking about this as we talk about this case, because there's an important theme here. Ryan took the stand and sat in that chair and told you what he knew. He told you what happened. He didn't have to do that. He could have remained silent and sat over there this entire trial and not told you his story. And you saw him sit there and tell you that story from his own mouth, with his own words, with his own emotion. And you saw how it affected him when he talked. Don't forget that when the state gets up here and tries to tell you that he's a liar. You saw him. You can tell whether he's telling the truth from that chair or not. Keep that in mind as we go through the evidence in the case, because I think it's very important when we talk about his statement that he gave to the police, which you all have heard a lot about. There are a whole bunch of inconsistencies in that thing. And what did the witness yesterday, Mr. Posey, tell us? It was all over the place. Why was it all over the place? Because he wasn't there. He has no idea what the facts are surrounding her death because he was not there. He told you who was there. Bo Dukes woke him up and said, "I killed Tara." Not, "I killed Miss Grinstead. I killed Tara." Bo Dukes had her Bo Dukes was one of her students. Ryan was not. Bo Dukes left that trailer that night with Ben McMahon in a black truck at around 10 o'clock at night. Ryan was passed out on the floor. You heard from Jerry, famous Jerry now, I assume, picked him up by the belt and dropped him on the floor to make sure he was alive. And he groaned, and that's the last time anybody saw Ryan that night, passed out on the bathroom floor. Well, what does that mean? From a timing standpoint, it means a lot, because it means Bo Dukes was not in that trailer on Saturday night. Ryan was. And Tara Grinstead, as we'll see, left her house that night. And where did she go? These are all questions that the state could have answered for you, and they didn't. So you never leave your common sense at the courthouse steps. As a juror, you're always entitled to use your human experience in your own daily life to understand what makes sense to you as a human being. You can listen to the evidence and the testimony all you want, but you all have your personal experiences that you draw from. As we go through this evidence, just use your common sense. What is the most likely thing that happened based on what we know about the evidence? Before I get through that part of it and start talking about the specific evidence in the case, which in our view is very limited, I want to talk to you about what the state did in the presentation of its case and why it's important. There are close to 300 exhibits in this case. Photographs, other kinds of documents. There were 35 witnesses they brought to you. As you're going through all that, and I'm sure the state's going to stand up and talk about the volume of evidence in this case. It's not about the volume of evidence. It's about the quality of the evidence. And you heard a GBI agent, Gary Rothwell, tell you the larger the file, the less you know. That's exactly what's happening here. They're not going to tell you that, but they hid Bo Dukes, they hid her best friend, they hid other stuff in this mass of evidence that they're going to say is all relevant. If you focus in on the details, which we heard yesterday, the details matter in terms of inconsistencies in evidence, you're going to find there's very little here. And there's nothing that links Ryan to this murder at all. Nothing. And so you need to, as a juror, hold the state accountable for trying to hide information and evidence from you in this volume of stuff. Don't make the same mistake that GBI made in 2005 by chasing all these leads that had nothing to do with the case. They missed stuff that was obvious in 2005, and they missed stuff that was obvious in 2017 because they made an assumption after nearly 12 years of searching for Tara Grinstead that they had their man. As soon as Ryan Duke walked into that interview room, they had an answer, and they were going to close this case. They were anxious for closure of this case, and they were blinded by it, and they refused to look at the details. Agent Shadell told you that when Ryan gave the statement, that's it. he didn't go and look into the case file to see if it was actually consistent with case evidence, and we're going to get into that in a second. He accepted everything, even though there were unresolved inconsistencies in Ryan's statement, which we heard about yesterday from Agent Posey, that they can't explain. Again, the reason why the statement is so important to the state is there's no physical evidence linking Ryan to the alleged crime scene. And the information that Ryan gave in the interview was fed to him by Agent Shadell. So if we look at the case evidence, and we do that with an assumption that the house is not the crime scene, the state wants you to assume that. If we don't assume it, and we look at what's actually inside the house, and we look at it, and we look at the car, and we look at the timeline, it doesn't add up. And that's reasonable doubt. So we know that Bo Dukes and Ben McMahon left the trailer at 10 o'clock on Saturday night. What do we know about Tara Grinstead? We know that she went to the pageant, she had her cell phone with her all day, and that she, after the pageant, went to see a friend, and then went to a cookout at Troy Davis's house, and made several calls while she was there. She leaves Troy Davis's house around 11 o'clock to go home. She says she's going home. After that, we have no idea what she did or who she saw. So we've heard several witnesses, GBI witnesses, come, and even folks who went into the house Monday morning, come and tell you that they recognized that there was no sign of a struggle inside the house. None. There was some talk about a lampshade, a candle tipped over on its side, and a cloth that was sitting upright on the floor. Those were the three things that, plus there was a stain on the comforter, a blood stain on the comforter. That's it. There's nothing else. If you go back and review the testimony in your notes from Agent Rossler, who's the crime scene tech who processed the scene, he found no fingerprints anywhere inside the house. He found no fingerprints on the door jamb linking Ryan to the house. He found nothing in terms of fingerprints linking Ryan to the car or any other back door, any of that sort of thing. Nothing linking him fingerprint-wise to inside the house. Well, why is that important? Well, if you believe Ryan's statement to the GBI in February of 2017, he said, didn't he wear gloves when he went in initially? So that means he grabbed the doorknob and shut it. So he grabbed both doorknobs and shut it and didn't leave a fingerprint. That doesn't make common sense. If he had not used gloves, his fingerprints would be on the door. They'd be on the door casing. So use your common sense. I think Agent Rothwell told us that they put a light bulb back in the lamp and it worked. So there was nothing unusual about the lamp itself. And of course, the house had been full of girls getting ready for a pageant. You could see from the pictures, and you will see from the pictures, and some that you've already seen, there were clothes everywhere, all this sort of stuff. I mean, it looked consistent with girls getting ready for a pageant. The drawers. There was talk of this drawer. The state suggested that these drawers were opened as if somebody had gone inside there looking for stuff to steal. Well, so that's the drawer that's open on the top. Use your common sense. Doesn't that look like it just hasn't been pushed shut because the clothes are in the drawer? This is Exhibit 30. This is the other one they say the drawer was open as if to show it was evidence of some sort of theft. Use your common sense. It's a clothing drawer, and it's halfway out. The girls are getting ready for a pageant. What is the most likely reason that drawer is open, based on your common sense? So the bed. Let's talk about the bed. there was all this talk about the bed, the comforter being all in disarray, and that was somehow suggested that Miss Grinstead had been sleeping that night, Saturday night, when Ryan came in, supposedly. Well, let's look at that. So we haven't talked about this before. I don't know that we ever asked a single witness this question, but the one thing you see on that bed are throw pillows. Why are there throw pillows on a bed she was sleeping in? You need to ask yourself a common sense question. Wouldn't she have taken the throw pillows off the bed if she was in the bed sleeping? That's just one of those common sense things. If you look at the photographs and you don't assume that there's a crime scene here, it makes perfect sense to you. The comforter itself, we heard from Dina that they had flipped that over before the people got there to photograph it. So the fact that the comforter itself is not made, so to speak, is a function of people being in there before law enforcement got there, and they flipped it over. And to their credit, they didn't know they were in a crime scene or think they were in a crime scene. They were trying to figure out what happened to her. To their credit, they were just trying to figure out what happened. Okay? So use your common sense on that. And the blood itself, there's no blood on the floor. Nobody testified about any blood on the floor. There's no evidence of any cleanup on the floor. Anybody attempted to hide it. There's no blood on the bed other than what you can see on the comforter in this picture. Again, you have to use your common sense, right? If Ryan's statement to the GBI is true, that he struck a fatal blow to Tara Grinstead with one punch, and the state wants to suggest that this blood is the result of that, use your common sense. If that blow was significant enough to cause her death and to cause her to bleed, would that bed not be full of blood? Or would there not be blood on the floor? And would there not be evidence that somebody had tried to clean it up? Your common sense tells you that stain on that comforter is either from a monthly cycle or from sex itself. That makes sense, doesn't it? Common sense. The state's theory in this case is that this was a burglary. If you look on top of that dresser, there's a whole host of different types of jewelry laid out on top of it in plain sight. If this was indeed a burglary, then why is the jewelry still there? If this was such a desperation act, why is the jewelry sitting in plain sight? Why wouldn't he have taken it? The burglary theory does not make sense. And it doesn't make sense for another very important reason, is how did Ryan supposedly get in the house with a credit card? Let's think about that for a second. Agent Posey yesterday didn't even know whether there was a second lock on the door. That's how familiar with the file he was. He didn't even know there was a lock on the inside. And then when I asked him about it, he said, I can't really tell if that's a lock or not. I knew all you needed to know right then about his opinions because he wouldn't agree with me on something so simple as whether or not that was a lock. You also heard Miss Hart talk about that upper lock and use a photograph. She used this one. She used this one to suggest to you, by asking a witness a question, I believe it was Agent Shadell, she used this photograph to suggest to you that lock was not operational. And she referred to, you've seen these things in public bathrooms, they're missing, right? And she pointed to this picture as evidence of that. And you can clearly see right here that the area where that second part of the lock would be on this door casing up here is missing. So why would she suggest to you in that photograph that this lock was not operational? Of the close to 300 exhibits that they gave to you, she did not give you this one, which was in the case file. We had to tender this exhibit. This is the evidence that the door had an operational second part. We had to show that to you. The state didn't. They chose not to. Why would they choose not to put that one photograph? Of all these scene photographs, why are they not showing you that one? They're scared of that lock. That's why. What does that lock mean? Very important detail. It's not listed anywhere in the GBI file. Largest file in GBI history, and there's no record of anybody summarizing any testimony or any scene investigation that documents that interior lock. That lock is important because we learned that Tara Grinstead's greatest fear was being attacked at night. She and Heath Dykes were in love. And that relationship, we didn't get into the relationship. That's none of our business, honestly. What was important, though, is that they had a relationship where he would know that. He would be close enough to her to know that she would have locked that door at night. Her best friend also came here and told you that, and she's known Tara Grinstead since she was 4 years old. She saw her regularly, been inside that house regularly. And what did she tell you? She told you Tara would have locked that door if she'd been there that night. We know on Monday morning, Joe Portier shows up with the spare key from next door. That door is locked from the outside. He turns the key and opens it. That tells us that interior lock was never locked that night. That means Tara Grinstead was never inside that house, and that was not a crime scene. She left that house and locked the door behind her, took her purse and keys, and we don't know where she went. But we know she wasn't there. That interior lock is an important key fact in this case, and the GBI never found it. We had to find it and show it to you. And then when we brought it up, the state didn't want to show it to you either. They wanted to hide it. That interior lock is important for another reason, too. It can't be picked. Gary Rothwell told you that. You can't use a credit card to pick that lock. It's a hotel-style lock. It goes over like this and it locks. And from the inside, and you couldn't use a credit card to get in. So even if you assume that Ryan's story about this credit card is true, it doesn't match up. Because if Tara's home inside, that door lock is locked. And he can get the bottom lock picked maybe, but he's not going to get that top one picked. That lock is critical to unlocking everything. So, and why is the front door so important? We saw pictures and you heard testimony that the back door was covered with decorations on the outside, and she had a bunch of things stored next to it on the inside in the laundry room. So she didn't use that door, and it was secure. All the windows in the house were secure. So if the state's theory is correct, whoever went inside that house to do this crime in this alleged crime scene had to go through the front door. Why are there no fingerprints for Ryan on the door handle? Why are there no fingerprints or anything else inside the house from Ryan? Why is Ryan's DNA not in the house? So the other thing about the doors, which is important, I asked a few questions of witnesses about this, is the chimes. Aside from her habit, based on her fear of being attacked, she had door chimes on both doors. The purpose of which is to make sure she knew when someone opened the door. Now, it's less important for us necessarily to think about how that might have affected her if she heard them ring that night, assuming someone had gone in. But more importantly, if she was scared enough to have chimes on both doors to alert her to people coming into the house, she would have locked that door from the inside if she'd been home. We also heard from her best friend that she had a pair of yoga pants that were missing. And there was at least one witness told us that there was the pair. She had told the GBI. Gary Rothwell told us this, that they were familiar with the case, and that she had also a pair of sneakers were missing, a lace-up pair of sneakers. Where are the yoga pants? Where did they go? This is also other evidence suggesting that Tara Grinstead, changed when she went home and then left again around 11 o'clock or 11:15. I suspect the state's going to come up here and talk about the cell phone. This is going to be like the smoking gun of why Tara had to be in the house because of her habit with the cell phone. I believe there may have been one witness or two who talked about her always keeping her cell phone on her. And we all understand that. We do that too. But sometimes they lose the charge. It was found on the charger. And she had it all day long. Is it reasonable to believe that it was sitting on the charger because she had just put it on there to charge after she had just gotten home? There's nothing unusual about that. There's nothing unusual about that suggests that this is somehow evidence that she was taken from the home without her cell phone. It just means it might have been charging. I want to talk about Miss Grinstead's car. This was a white sports car that apparently everybody recognized in town. It was an unusual car, to say the least, at that time, and so everybody sort of recognized it. Where was the car? John Olmsted said he took his dog out around midnight for a walk, and that car was gone. Where did it go? And why is that important? It's further proof that Tara Grinstead left her residence that night in that car. The earliest anybody can testify that they saw it again on Sunday are the Boykins. They said it was between 2 and 4 o'clock. So that car is unaccounted for from midnight to about 2 o'clock the next day. Where was it? It just suddenly appears again, and it appears unlocked. Joe Portier, who knows Tara's habits with the car, said she never left it unlocked. Maria said she never left it unlocked. Both of them agreed that if it was unlocked, that would be really unusual. It was unlocked when it was found Monday morning. Nobody unlocked it. And they talked about that with the GBI when they were interviewed initially in October. The car is missing between midnight and 2 p.m. at the earliest. We have other witnesses who say that the car wasn't there until 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock at night. We're not going to quibble over the 2 to 4 hours that we're talking about there. The car's definitely missing. Nobody sees the car for a very significant period of time. Where was the car? And where was Bo during all of this? We would have loved to have asked him that. We wanted to. We called him. We were going to ask him a whole line of questions about where he was and what he was doing. But we didn't get that chance. So another thing I want to talk about is this, the portion of Ryan's statement where he says, I went back to get her, and let's talk about the phone stuff. So under the theory Agent Shadell has is that he went back, that he had some guilty knowledge about making a call. Well, Ryan told you why he made the call. Bo had just said he killed her, and he was trying to figure out whether he was lying or not, and he was trying to get her purse back to her. So he made the phone call to see where she was, if she was okay, and to return her purse. So all this guilty knowledge stuff just shows that he was concerned for Miss Grinstead and was trying to find out if this was another Bo crazy story or whether Bo had actually done something to her. Under the state's theory, Ryan drove back to that house in broad daylight on Sunday at church time, took a quilt, put Miss Grinstead in the quilt, carried her out the front door, put her in the truck, then went back to lock the front door. Because we know the door was locked, right? So he had to go back after doing this and risk being seen at 9:30 in the morning to lock the front door. Does that make common sense? It doesn't make common sense. Why would he do that? What's the reason to lock the front door? Wouldn't he just get in the truck and go if he's trying to avoid detection? It doesn't make common sense. The other issue with that, while we're talking about this, is if he had dropped the glove during this process, which is the state's theory, that somehow he dropped this glove while carrying Miss Grinstead's body out of her house. When he went back to lock the door, would he not have seen it? It was in plain sight. How would he have missed it? And he would have missed it twice. He would have missed it when he walked to the front door, and then he would have missed it again when he walked back. And the state's theory is he was trying to avoid being detected and avoid looking like he was carrying the body out. So he missed it twice if it's sitting on the ground when the state says it's sitting on the ground. So let's talk more about the glove. This is the state's smoking gun, right? The glove. But what do we know about that glove? We know the state hasn't brought a single witness to tell you that it was on the ground before Monday morning. Not one. They don't have a single person that came in here and told you that that glove was on the ground before Monday morning. We brought you some folks to tell you that on Sunday they didn't see it. Jared Luke walked to her front door Sunday evening to get a water bowl for the dog and to get the food. He said he walked up to the front door, he parked in the driveway, and then he walked up to the front door in the diagonal across the yard is what he said. He missed it. If it's on the ground at 9:30 in the morning on Sunday, and he goes there at 6 o'clock to deal with his dog's things, and he walks directly to the front door and then back, he's missed it twice. And he said that was during daylight hours. So two people now have missed this glove twice in broad daylight. That does not make common sense. So Heath Dykes, when he doesn't hear from Ms. Grinstead, starts to get very concerned. And you saw the phone calls and all of that. He's a captain in the police department. He lives an hour and 20 minutes away. He drives, he's so concerned, he drives all the way to Ocilla to check on her. When he gets here, he's in, I would be fair to classify it as panic mode, because it's not like her to not call him back. He's trained in scene investigations. And what did he tell you he saw at midnight on Sunday? He did not see a glove. He was looking for things that might be out of the ordinary to figure out what was going on. He's searching the outside of the house. He's looking in windows. He's walking around. He walked around to the carport. He sat here and he told you, he said, I didn't see a glove, and I would have seen a glove if it was there. That was his testimony. What's the only conclusion you could draw from that? That glove was not on the ground. It was not on the ground at midnight into Monday morning. How does that line up with the state's theory of the case? They haven't brought you a single person that's going to dispute that. All they're going to say is that glove was on the ground Monday morning. What does that tell us? And it's in plain sight. Let's call a spade here. You couldn't miss that glove. You've seen the photographs of it. You're going to have a chance to look at it when you guys go back to the jury room. Look, it's within 2 feet of the stones that go up to her front porch, and it's like within 5 feet of the front porch itself. Everybody saw it. Wouldn't Heath Dykes, even if it's dark, be able to see that whitish colored glove right off the stone pathway? Use your common sense. There's only one explanation for that glove. And we got testimony from the GBI agent Ashley Hinkle about that. If you may remember, Mr. Gibbs asked her a couple questions about process. And that process involved trying to get Bo Duke's DNA off that glove. They tried and tried and tried to exclude him as a contributor to that glove. And they couldn't do it. They excluded dozens of other folks. They tested everybody. And they were all excluded. They could not exclude Bo Dukes from the glove. And she also told you that the DNA on the glove would be consistent with someone dropping it in the front yard. Now, the state's probably going to argue, how could Bo Dukes in a million years know that there was DNA on that glove? He might not have. But he knew it could be Ryan's, and that people would investigate. That's the important part of the DNA issue with the glove, is they can't get Bo off it. And final piece on the glove. Gary Rothwell told you they considered that it had been planted. And I'm telling you, that's what our theory is that Bo did this on purpose, sometime between midnight and in the early morning hours of Monday. No one will know for sure because we couldn't ask him the questions. We really wanted to, but he was not made available to us. Why he did it at that time, we don't know. Whether he had help, we don't know. We're not going to cast aspersions or blame anybody without knowing exactly what happened, but we know we can surmise that he did have some help because the car comes back. Somebody had to get him, and somebody had to drive the car. So what happened? What happened that Saturday night into Sunday morning? So bear with me while I took some time last night. I'm about ready to turn this over to my better half, who's smarter than me. She's going to talk to you about how the law applies to this case. But I'm going to read some questions that I wrote, so that I can try to explain to you the doubts you may have and what impact that will have as you deliberate on this case. You have an awesome responsibility, an incredibly difficult responsibility, and that's trying to determine if Mr. Ryan Duke over there is guilty of this murder. And that's an incredible responsibility. So as you consider that question, consider these as well. After seeing Ryan testify, does some part of you think the state arrested the wrong person? If so, that doubt would be reasonable. Do you have a doubt in your mind about whether the state's theory of this case is correct or makes common sense? If you have a doubt about that, it's reasonable. Do you have a doubt in your mind why Miss Grinstead's favorite pair of sweatpants were missing from the house? If you do, that doubt's reasonable. Do you have a doubt in your mind why her upper door lock was not locked from the inside? If you do, that doubt is reasonable. Do you have a doubt why all law enforcement agree that there was no evidence of a crime being committed in her house? If you do, that doubt is reasonable. Do you have a doubt in your mind whether Miss Grinstead was in her house when she was killed? That doubt would be reasonable. Do you have a doubt about whether her car was gone when John Olmsted was out walking his dog around 11:30 or midnight on Saturday night? If you do, that doubt would be reasonable. Do you have a doubt in your mind about whether Ryan was able to get into her house with a credit card without being seen if that lock had been locked up there? If so, that doubt would be reasonable. Do you have a doubt in your mind as to whether a tilted lampshade, a candle, and a clock on the floor constitute evidence of any crime? If so, that doubt would be reasonable. Do you have a doubt as to how Ryan could have gotten into her house without leaving any fingerprints or DNA? If so, that doubt would be reasonable. And do you have a doubt in your mind as to whether it's reasonable to argue that the blood on the comforter is from a blow to the head, a fatal blow to the head? If so, that doubt would be reasonable. Do you have a doubt in your mind about whether or not such a blow could happen without any blood loss? If so, that doubt would be reasonable. Do you have a doubt as to why Ryan would go back and lock the front door after carrying Miss Grinstead's body out under the state's theory? If so, that doubt would be reasonable. I could go on and on and on about this. There's just so many specific factual questions you can ask yourself based on your common sense experience as jurors and say, does that make common sense to me? Or do I have a doubt about it? If you have a doubt about that, it goes directly to the state's theory of the case, and that doubt would be reasonable. They brought you 35 witnesses and over 300 exhibits. I challenge you, when you go back there, to look at it and see how much of it actually helps answer the question, what happened to Tara Grinstead on Saturday night. They have a statement from Ryan, and they have a glove. We've talked about the glove. We've talked about the statement. I could get up here and talk to you all day long about some of the stuff that Agent Posey and I were going over yesterday. You've recently heard that testimony, so I'm not going to do it. But I will remind you that you got to hear from Ryan directly. Not through us, not through any other means, but you got to see him testify from the chair and see him get emotional about this. And he took responsibility for what he did. That's an incredible thing for him to do as a criminal defendant because most don't do that. All right, so I am going to turn the stage over to my better half, who's going to talk to you about the instructions you'll receive from the court. I want to thank you all so much for your time. This is the last chance I'll get to talk to you on behalf of Ryan. Greatly appreciate your time and attention. Thank you.
court.
Thank you, Judge. I will probably be a little more brief because I'm going to be talking to you about the law and how that applies to the facts in this case, or the lack of facts in this case, lack of evidence in this case. One of the concepts the judge is going to charge you on, and you're going to get copies of these charges. So they're charges of the law, and what that is the judge telling you what the law is that you have to apply in this case to the facts as you've heard them. One of those is what reasonable doubt is. The judge is going to tell you that the state has the burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Ryan committed this crime in the manner that they have charged in this indictment. He's also going to tell you that the state has the burden to disprove our defense in this case. So not only do they have the burden to prove what they say happened, they also have to disprove what we said happened. And that's very important. Rebuttal, you've seen how a trial works. You've seen the state put up their case, the defense put up their case, and then the state rebuttal. That's what rebuttal's for. It's for them to attempt to disprove what we put up. And I challenge you that they did not disprove anything that we submitted in our case. Ryan told you what happened, and the state did not bring one single bit of evidence to disprove what Ryan told you under oath on that stand. Reasonable doubt can also be conflicts in the evidence, and the charges are going to tell you that. It's conflicts in the evidence. And so you all have to determine what conflicts you found in the evidence, and we'll talk about some of those, and determine if there's reasonable doubt to resolve those conflicts. Reasonable doubt can also be found in lack of evidence. So if there's something that is missing for you, that is reasonable doubt. It's also any combination of these. And when the judge charges you, he's going to give you this specific language, that if your mind at the end of this case is wavering, unsettled, or unsatisfied, it is your duty to acquit. It is your duty to check not guilty on that verdict form. Wavering, unsettled, or unsatisfied. Those are important terms. Those are legal terms. But they also are common sense terms. You know what that means. And if your mind has any of those today, it is your duty as a juror to find Ryan not guilty. The jury charges talk about corroboration. Okay, this is a legal term, so I want to kind of talk about it, but it's a common sense term too. I mean, everybody knows what corroboration means. The charge that you're going to hear is that an out-of-court statement, so Ryan's statement to Agent Shadell is an out-of-court statement. If that out-of-court statement is not supported by any other evidence, it is not sufficient to justify a conviction, even if you believe the unsupported statement. Why is that important? If you believe that what Ryan told Agent Shadell, if you believe that, that's not enough. They have to present evidence to every element of this crime to corroborate that statement. They have to bring you evidence. They have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt the cause of death. They have to prove how Miss Grinstead died. Outside of his statement, they have to prove where Miss Grinstead died. They have to prove she died in Irwin County. And they have to prove that she died from a single blow, a punch, a hit from Ryan. When you listen, and I'm sure when the state gets up there, they're going to play Ryan's statement. I would imagine that that's what they're going to play. And they may play just excerpts of it. I doubt they'll play the entire thing for you. I'm sure they will play excerpts. I want you to remember that they are picking and choosing what you hear out of that statement. They're picking and choosing what they believe is true out of that statement. They're not playing for you what Ryan told you here in court under oath. They're not playing for you what he told you when he could testify truthfully and honestly without fear of Bo Dukes. He told you, why was he not able to tell this before? Because he was scared. And we asked every single one of you in jury selection if you believed that a person would lie to protect their family. And everybody agreed. We asked the agents that. We asked both agents who talked to you about interviews if they were trained that people would lie to protect their family. And they both told you yes. Agent Shadell told you yes, and Agent Posey told you yes. That is in their training. Ryan told you that he lied to protect his family from a person that walked in this courtroom in shackles and wouldn't even admit what his name was. So finally, why can Ryan come in and tell you the truth? Bo is in prison. Ryan told you that. Bo is finally in prison. Ryan can finally, and you saw it. You saw what he's been holding in all these years. He's been keeping Bo's secret for almost 2 decades. You saw that on his face. And so the state's going to play what they want you to believe, a statement that was given when Bo was on the loose, a statement that was given when Ryan was scared, when Ryan had taken drugs, when Ryan had been suffering from anxiety, depression, all of these issues for all these years. They're going to pick and choose. What is that? Smoke and mirrors. That is trying to divert you from what you heard on this witness stand. One of the other things, one of the other things, and it's not exciting, but one of the other things that the state has to prove is what's called venue. Okay? Another term, but common sense. He's going to read you the charges. Venue is in the county where the state proved, beyond a reasonable doubt, the cause of death was inflicted. If the cause of death can't be determined, venue is where the state proved the dead body is discovered. We asked every witness that was qualified to answer this what the cause of death was. There is no testimony as to what the cause of death is in this case. Not one single bit of evidence. Not one statement. The experts that they brought said, we cannot determine the cause of death. And again, it's not a fun topic to talk about, but the law requires that the cause of death be committed in Irwin County, and it requires that they prove the cause of death. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason that the law requires that. We do not want to send innocent people to prison. Talk a little bit about some of the specific charges. The state charged in the first 3 counts of the indictment, and you'll get a copy of the indictment. They charged malice murder is the first count. What do they have to prove? They have to prove malice, and I'm sure the state's going to talk to you a lot about malice, but malice in this case isn't really, I'm not going to spend any time talking about it because it's just not relevant. There was no evidence of malice. But what else do they have to prove? They have to prove that Ryan caused her death in the manner that they said he did, by using his hand. They have to prove that. For felony murder, the second 2 counts, 2 and 3, they also have to prove that he caused Miss Grinstead's death. They have to prove that he caused her death while burglarizing her home and while he was assaulting her with his hand. They have to prove that she died in that manner. That is cause of death. For those counts, the first 3, the murder counts, and I'm lumping them together again, the malice murder and the felonies, beyond a reasonable doubt, they have to prove the cause of death. They have to prove Irwin County, and they have to prove by the hand. And I'm going to talk about some elements that you can consider, because I believe the state will argue to you that a hand can be considered a deadly weapon. Okay, well, what does the law say about that? The law says, and you're going to hear these, the judge is going to read them to you, the factors to be considered: the nature and the extent of any injury inflicted. We heard no testimony about any injury inflicted. The character or capabilities of the weapon. Is it possible to die from a single hit with a hand? And we're not even getting there, because Ryan did not hit Miss Grinstead. But looking at the state's case, that's what they're going to argue. The manner that the hand was used. Any other circumstances of the case. The other counts are the aggravated assault and the burglary. I talked about the aggravated assault enough. It's whether or not he committed a crime and rendered serious bodily injury. So there'd have to be some testimony that Ms. Grinstead suffered a serious bodily injury in Irwin County, in her home, by Ryan. The burglary, same thing, Irwin County, in her home, that he broke into her house with the intent to commit a theft. And John talked to y'all about the locks. Y'all have this picture back there. It's pretty clear. You can see it right there. You'll have it back there, so feel free to take it with you and look at it. The last count is concealing the death. What are the elements of that crime? That Ryan concealed Miss Grinstead's death, that he hindered the discovery of whether or not she was killed in Irwin County. We are not here to determine if he assisted in burning Miss Grinstead, in cremating her in Ben Hill County. We are here to determine whether or not he assisted in concealing her death in Irwin County. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But I want to talk about the corroboration again. When I'm talking about the charges, I talked about corroboration. I anticipate, and I have to say what I anticipate the state's going to argue, because I don't get to come back up here after they argue. This is the last you get to hear from us. So we don't get to come and rebut what they say. They get to rebut what we say, but we don't get to rebut what they say. And that's just the law, so that's fine. So I'm telling you what I anticipate, trying to answer whatever questions they may raise for you that I'm anticipating they will. I anticipate they're going to argue that this 411 call was guilty knowledge. Ryan told you he called Miss Grinstead's house that Sunday morning. He told you why. He told you he was trying to return her purse. That phone call is not evidence that he killed Miss Grinstead. It's not. Under any common sense, reasonable theory, that phone call is not corroboration that he killed Miss Grinstead and she died in her home as the result of a hit in Irwin County. It's not. It doesn't corroborate that. It's not guilty knowledge of anything. It's not corroboration for the crimes that he has charged. It's the smoke and mirrors. It's this illusion that there's evidence. It's this illusion that there's corroboration when there is none. Same thing with this glove. I'm not going to belabor it. I know Mr. Merchant, John, talked about this a lot. But we had 3 witnesses that were outside Miss Grinstead's home on Sunday. 3. None of them saw the glove. The glove does not corroborate murder. The glove does not corroborate aggravated assault. The glove does not corroborate any charge in this indictment. There is no conflict in the evidence. So we talked about reasonable doubt and how you could consider conflicts in the evidence or lack of evidence. On this glove, there is 0 conflict. You don't have to resolve it. It's clear. Every single witness that came in here and took the stand said the glove was not here on Sunday. There is no evidence that it was there on Sunday. No evidence that it did not appear until Monday morning. Any argument to the contrary is trying to get you to not look at the actual evidence in the case. We had witnesses in our rebuttal, and we had some during direct, about good character. The judge is going to tell you that in Georgia, the good character of a defendant is a defense in a crime. There were witnesses that took this stand that said Ryan is a peaceful, kind, and caring person. Not one single person testified to the contrary. Not one. The state has to disprove that good character, that peaceful character, beyond a reasonable doubt. They have not brought one single person to disprove Ryan's peaceful character. And you heard from members of your own community. You heard from great members of your community that Ryan is a peaceful and kind person. I want to, since I said I can't get back up here, I want to leave you with some questions, and so I'm going to get. Thank you. Again, since we don't get to come back up here, we don't have a burden. The state has to answer. Thank you. The state has to answer every question in this case. Any question, any doubt you have, they have to answer. So I've written out in my terrible handwriting some questions that I challenge the state to get up here and answer for you, because you deserve to have an answer to these questions. How does the glove corroborate how Miss Grinstead died? Cause of death. Something they have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. How does the glove corroborate that Ryan caused her death? I asked Agent Chagall these questions, and he said it doesn't. He said there's no evidence of this. How does the glove corroborate that she died in Irwin County? A glove that did not appear until Monday morning. How does the call corroborate, this 411 call? How does it corroborate the cause of death? Remember, the law says his statement has to be corroborated. So they want you to believe that that one statement is the statement that is the Holy Grail. And they have to corroborate it. How does that call corroborate that Ryan is the one that killed Miss Grinstead? How does it corroborate that she actually even died in Irwin County? What proof beyond a reasonable doubt has the state brought you to prove Ryan's statement to Agent Shadell was accurate? Because everything you heard from the witness stand was that it was not. That it was a mess. It was all over the place. What evidence has the state brought you to disprove Ryan's sworn testimony in front of you beyond a reasonable doubt? They have to do all this. They have to answer all these questions. And again, I don't get to get back up here. So I leave these questions and challenge the state to try and answer these questions, because everybody deserves. They're asking you to convict a man of murder, and they can't answer these questions. And the law requires that. Some other questions that I couldn't fit on my board. Has one single person come in here to testify that they saw that glove on Sunday? No. 3 said they didn't. So I challenge the state to tell you what evidence they have that that glove was there on Sunday, other than they just want you to believe it. How is it possible, another question that I'd love the state to be able to answer, how is it possible that you heard from 5 witnesses that did not see Miss Grinstead's car on Sunday morning, but not one single witness to come and say they saw Ryan carrying out a body in a quilt? Not one. In broad daylight, when everybody is headed to Sunday school. Not one. How is it possible that Ryan broke into Miss Grinstead's house with a credit card when she had a hotel-style loan? And I challenge the state. Why did they not bring you this photo? Why did they ask witnesses about this photo that doesn't show this part? To create the illusion, to create smoke and mirrors, so that you believed that, oh, it might be broken. Have you never been in a public bathroom where it's broken? Those were the questions that were asked. Well, that's disingenuous. It's not broken. And you heard testimony that she installed that lock specifically because Anthony Vickers had tried to break into her house. That lock was there specifically to avoid people breaking in. She used that lock. How is it possible that Ryan, this is another question that I challenge the state to answer. How is it possible that Ryan killed Miss Grinstead in her home with one hit and left no blood? And they brought in a crime scene expert to say there was no evidence of cleanup. They put that testimony in. No evidence of cleanup. So no evidence of cleanup, and this comforter is what they got? What evidence does the state have as to what happened to Miss Grinstead? What evidence outside of a statement, an uncorroborated statement that was given by a man who was scared for his life and by a man who was trying to protect his family under the influence of drugs? We can dispute that, but everybody can agree that he took some drugs. Whether he took 1, whether he took 2, who knows? But a man who was confused and didn't get the facts that Agent Shadell wanted him to say right. So he kept asking and asking and asking. Ryan did something awful, and he admitted that to you on the stand. He has lived with that guilt for almost 2 decades. He did not kill Tara Grinstead. He did not break into her house. He did not assault her. He is not the cause of Miss Grinstead's death. And he did nothing to contribute to her death. He's not guilty of every single count in this indictment. We're here to ask you to seek the truth and seek justice for everyone in this case. And that would be a verdict of not guilty. I started this trial off talking about power. Ryan told you he felt powerless all those years. The state has had the power to bring you evidence, to bring you proof, and they have failed to do that. You now have the power to do the right thing. You now have the power to say, that's not enough. You did not prove this case. Ryan did not do this. He did not kill Miss Grinstead. We all know who killed Miss Grinstead. Ryan told you who killed Miss Grinstead. The person who killed Miss Grinstead came in here and pled the fifth to his name. Ryan got up here and withstood cross-examination and let you all of his stuff. I mean, just, you know, things about he was depressed, things that nobody should have to get up here and testify in the public to. But he told you that. And at the end of the day, you now have the power. You have the power to make the decision in this case. And we trust you and think that you will find Ryan not guilty. And that's how we ask that you submit your verdict on that form. Thank you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's take a recess before we start the state summation. Anybody want to get some fresh air